Welcome to the Flexo webinar on compatibility packs and more specifically the graphical planning tables in S/4HANA. My name is Nicolas Delaco, functional consultant at Flexo, focusing mainly on quality management, plant maintenance and production planning.
And my name is Michiel de Vrij. I work for 7 years at Flexo now within the supply chain management team with a focus on the planning solutions that SAP have to offer.
All right. If we go through the agenda, we'll start with a short introduction first on compatibility packs. What is it? What does it entail? And what is the deadline there? Next, we'll look at some scheduling alternatives in S4. So we'll talk about the standard Fiori applications that come with S/4HANA Private Cloud. We'll have a look at RIO, which is short for Resource Orchestration in Digital Manufacturing. We'll have a look at embedded PPDS in S4. And lastly, we'll have a look at our own custom application called the Flexo Scheduling Board. After that, we'll also give a conclusion comparing these different alternatives to one another and drawn from our own experiences. And of course, we'll end with a Q&A where everyone can pose questions on these alternatives we present today. But so first, time to clean out your ERP closet, replace your compatibility packs in S/4HANA. So what does compatibility packs really mean? So when S/4HANA was first conceived in the private cloud edition, a lot of old functionality from SAP ECC was transferred directly to S/4HANA Private Cloud, so including the old graphical planning tables. However, since SAP S/4HANA 2023, SAP has been working on new functionalities, mainly located in the Fiori domain, the Fiori Launchpad. They've been developing all kinds of new solutions to replace these old functionalities from SAP ECC. There's actually a subnote online on the SAP4Me website that you can consult, where you can see all these old functionalities listed and the new functionalities that SAP has developed since. It's a huge Excel file with tons of old functionality that is going to be replaced. It spans all domains also, so it's not just production planning, it's finance, plant maintenance, quality management, customer service, right? And you can find all of it in that one SAP note. If you don't feel like going through the entire note, it's a huge Excel file, there's also an alternative. There's a thing called Early Watch Report in SAP4Me. So if your company is communicating EW data to SAP from your own S/4HANA system, and you have an S user with sufficient authorizations, there's actually a report that you can trigger for your company where SAP checks itself into your system whether you're still using old functionality and which new functionality you should be using, right? There's a video here in the presentation that will be shared after the webinar where you can see how it really works. But okay, why does SAP allow these old and these new functionalities to coexist in S/4HANA? And there's two big reasons for that. The first one is to make the transition easier for customers coming from SAP ECC or Business Suite to go to S/4HANA Private Cloud. That transition from old to new, making that change management impact lower. It's also, secondly, to allow customers sufficient time to redesign their processes and to do the necessary change management towards these new functionalities. Those are the two basic reasons why old versus new have been coexisting for such a long time. However, here's the catch, there's a deadline. As you can see on the timeline in the presentation, by December 2025, all these old functionalities are end of use. So what does that really mean? End of use in this context means that SAP reserves the right to no longer include these old functionalities in future releases of S/4HANA, right? So it doesn't mean it will stop working right away, but okay, SAP has the right to exclude them from future releases. And that's a big wake-up call. Now, in this particular webinar, we're not going to zoom in all the functionalities that will disappear. We're going to have a focus here more specifically on the graphical planning tables for the old transactions CM21 to CM25.
Okay, and indeed, as Nicolas said, one of these impacted domains, apart from all the other ones, is scheduling in SAP PP. And scheduling in SAP EP, yeah, for most people that are doing scheduling in SAP EP, you are using the graphical planning table, or better known as by its transaction code, CM25. So this one is part of the compatibility pack. So first, maybe to explain a bit more about the graphical planning table, or to put it a bit into context. So although it's not really seen as the best-in-class solution, CM25 is used by a lot of companies. Why? Yeah, of course, it's in the standard license, and it does offer a scheduling Gantt chart, which is, of course, for a lot of companies important that they are visually able to do their scheduling. Why do I say not that best in class? Yeah, although it does offer the possibilities to do scheduling, there are some findings in general, some comments that we get from clients, and also, of course, some things that we experience ourselves. And one of them is that it's not 100% user-friendly. What do we mean with that? Yeah, of course, partially it's just a bit of an old-fashioned look, but also in the way, yeah, it's not that easy to effectively make a scheduling while visualizing all the info that you need to. Neither is it really flexible to revise your scheduling in case of a last-minute change that you need to apply, for example. Or yeah, it's also difficult to customize both from a technical aspect, as it's a bit challenging for consultants, but it's also limiting the functional possibilities to customize the scheduling board. And next to that, yeah, for a lot of companies who need to do a bit more advanced planning, it's just insufficient in functionality. So you very quickly collide into the boundaries of the possibilities of this application. Now, as we already mentioned, it's end of life. What does it mean? Nicola already mentioned it, but I just want to make sure that you really understand it if you are concerned about it. So end of 2025, it's end of life. It really means that it's actually the support is ending. So in your current version that you are using, in the situation that you are in, it's not that the transaction or all the other ones linked to that will stop working. It's just if you have an issue, then it's at your own risk. That doesn't only concern the transaction, but it also concerns all the BAPIs and possible developments that you have running based on the BAPIs, the function modules. So you have to be a bit careful with that. But again, it's not that it will stop working altogether. What is the case, as Nicola said, SAP reserves the right that it will just not be involved in a future release. We don't know when yet, SAP didn't communicate it, but yeah, it's still something to pay attention to. So what is our advice? Maybe it's a good idea to migrate before upgrading. If you're not upgrading, then at least start looking into migrating. So basically, don't panic. Nevertheless, start taking action. Especially if you are planning to do an upgrade in the future, check what the scheduling alternatives are, check which ones fit you best, and then go from there and maybe already plan in before you run into the issues. Now, maybe there are customers here in the webinar that are not using CM25, and then they are thinking, yeah, okay, so far we've been focusing more on that aspect, what's in it for me? Yeah, as from this point, we will not focus on CM25 anymore. We will compare the solutions, but we will more just start discussing what are the future-proof alternatives for scheduling within the SAP landscape. Which means that if you're looking for scheduling in SAP, all the information that will come next is very relevant for you, even if you are not using the graphical planning table or CM25. So now we will start by giving you an overview of the scheduling alternatives.
Yeah, thank you. So the first alternative we need to have a look at is what's available standard in the Fiori applications when you buy or procure S/4HANA Private Cloud. And there's tons of standard applications that are available for you embedded in the product. So let's see what's in there for scheduling. So there's actually 3 applications that SAP themselves put forward as an alternative for the old graphical planning tables. And those are 3 applications, 3 standard Fiori apps. So one's called Manage Work Center Capacity, the other one is the Capacity Planning Table, and the last one is the Capacity Planning Board. As you can see on the slide, there's tons of information you can find online on these applications. Next to the Fiori ID, you have a help portal with tons of information on how these apps work. There's learning journeys, videos, and they're also included in the standard best practices. So there's tons of information you can find on these apps. Let's maybe go through them now on a high level, one by one, how they compare to CM25 and what they do. So the first one is called Managed Work Center Capacity. This app, when you open it, it will give you an overview of all your work centers with their capacity loads expressed in a certain percentage. You get a list overview where you can then click on a particular work center to see the details. And the details take you to this kind of page here, as you can see in the presentation, where you get a graphical overview of your work center and the load spread in the different days for production. As you can see, when it's in red, it means you have an overload in terms of capacity planning, so over 100%. If it's green, you've got a normal capacity going on. You cannot just view this overload for your work center, but you can also do some changes. So if you click on one of those days that would have an overload, you have two options. You can either reschedule that production order operation or one of the operations on that day towards another day, but within the same work center. Or you can enhance the work center capacity itself. So you could say, okay, on this particular day, I'm going to let my people work a little longer, or the production line will be open for a bit longer. Or you can increase the number of capacities. The number of people, for example, working on that line, you can increase it, and you will immediately see that load go down in the graphical presentation here. So quite useful to identify some bottlenecks. Where do you have an overload? But the amount of actions you can take are limited, let's say. The second app is called the Capacity Scheduling Table. And as it says in the name, it's an app that gives you an overview of your production order operations in table form. It's got tons of information about your orders and your operations. It's got deadline monitoring, alert monitoring. You can schedule and sequence from this app, which is what you want to do. It's quite useful. But of course, it's not a Gantt chart planning board. It's a table form, which for some people might be restrictive. However, from this app, you can jump to a second application, which is called the Capacity Scheduling Board. And this will ring a bell with most people. This looks very familiar, looks a lot like CM25. However, it's not the same. It does have some big differences in the sense that it's mostly a display functionality. When you jump to this capacity scheduling board, there's actually very few actions you can perform from this app. It's more of to get an insight or a view, a display into what you just did in the previous app, in the table form. You can drag and drop what's called bottleneck operations, but you can only define one bottleneck operation per production order, so that's kind of restrictive. Not really useful, to be honest. Also, in terms of customization, CM25 used to have a lot of customization options. Here, what you see is what you get. The color scheme, the fields you see, the filters, the parameters, the options, it's all standard, and there's nothing you can change about it. And if you want to do some sequencing changing, you always need to jump back to the table form app and then view the results in this scheduling board. So, to summarize, comparing these three Fiori applications, embedded Fiori applications to CM25, first requirement or thing that's important is the dispatching, and that works fine. If you want to dispatch and sequence operations in standard Fiori applications, S/4HANA Private Cloud, it's possible, and these three apps will allow you to do that. Drag and drop on a Gantt chart planning board, that's more difficult. Not really, only those bottleneck operations. However, that's very restrictive. Order information, fine in the table form app, but in the Gantt chart, it's kind of very limited, making it less useful. So user friendliness is kind of low because you do have to jump between these two applications all the time, the graphical planning board and the table form, to see your results and interact with one another. And then lastly, customization is very low. What you see is what you get in these apps. All right. That brings us to The second alternative.
Yes, so now we turn to the alternatives which actually do offer a functional scheduling board in the form of a Gantt chart. And the first one we would like to discuss of those options is the resource orchestration in DM. Maybe first a little bit of context on DM. What is DM? Because it's another SAP acronym, of course. DM stands for digital manufacturing. And digital manufacturing, it's basically the SAP Cloud MES system. So it's an MES system designed for your operational and shop floor activities, but on the cloud. So part of the solutions that it brings is a resource orchestration. So that's not the complete solution, but it's a functionality of digital manufacturing. What is resource orchestration? Yeah, it entails a lot of options for a production supervisor, or that's what it is designed for the production supervisor, to do shop floor management, to manage expectations there, and to monitor events, and also to schedule, for example, this operations and dispatching them to work centers and resources. So it's this last part that we are focusing on now as a possible replacement for CM25 or as a scheduling solution altogether. So it does offer a scheduling board, a Gantt chart, as you can see in the print screen. You can do scheduling, you can do load balancing. On top of that, it's also possible via connection with BTP to connect it with SuccessFactors to automatically integrate all your workforce availability into the resource orchestration to be available to really check your availability of your workforce to schedule accordingly. Next to that, also something that is specifically possible in resource orchestration, it's employee skill management. So you can maintain a skill matrix, and in that skill matrix you can define, okay, you can assign certain qualifications to certain employees, see which ones have which skills, and maybe even identify some gaps in your skill profiles. So you might need to organize some training to be able for your people to have a bit of a broader profile in specific skills. Next to that, there is also some alert monitoring, meaning exception-based planning, but here we have to mention that, yeah, as it's an MES system, it's a bit more focused on ongoing production activities instead of real planning activities. There is visibility and possibilities to plan and schedule according to demand, real demand, new demand, but everything is a bit more focused on shop floor activity. So here it depends a little bit in the nuances in what is important for you and whether this is a really good option or not. But of course, it's part of digital manufacturing. So yeah, as we will mention later as well, it's more of an option if you already have digital manufacturing in your architecture. Now, having said all of that, how does it compare to CM25? Yeah, actually quite well. The only part that we say like, okay, maybe it still lacks a little bit is in the customizability. But if you really make a comparison with CM25, that was also not one of its strongest suits. So you don't lack anything, you even get a little bit more than what CM25 can do. So purely from a functionality point of view, it actually looks like a decent alternative. Leaving that one behind, now going to our next scheduling alternative, we go to PPDS. Again, an acronym, sorry. And PPDS stands for Production Planning and Detailed Scheduling, which is already an indication that we are not only talking about scheduling here, but it can actually do a lot more than just scheduling. We will not go through all of it, what it can do, but this is basically, yeah, let's say from a functionality point of view, the best-in-class solution that SAP has to offer. Before discussing what PPDS actually can do, I would like to first position where PPDS is located on the hand of, on the one hand, flow of goods, which you see from the left to the right, and also on the strategic versus operational short-term time horizon. So flow of goods, it goes from procurement to sales. It's clear that the strongest part of production planning and detailed scheduling is linked, what's in the name, to the production part. You can do procurement planning, you can see what's perhaps going wrong with your sales orders, but the maintenance of your sales orders is not done there. On the other hand, strategic to operational short term, again there's an overlap, but let's say strategically the strongest suit is in the more short term operational scheduling and planning. You can do a bit more mid-term network planning as well. There are options for that, but let's say whatever you do more strategic, more mid-term, from an SAP point of view, that's more located within IBP. Now, putting back our focus on PPDS and production planning and scheduling, as I mentioned, you have a planning part and you have a scheduling part. And that's important to know. This planning part, what will it do? It will plan and it will decide what you need to produce in a certain time bucket. And your scheduling part, it will sequence your orders in the correct order for efficiency reasons, but of course still making sure that everything is delivered when it needs to be delivered. How does it measure? How does it weigh in into your landscape? PPDS or embedded PPDS is actually fully embedded in S/4HANA. It means that actually your basic production planning, your PP, so all the apps that Nicola was discussing before, they are available and you're building further upon that. So everything that Nicola mentioned, you can use, that's not a problem. But PPDS just offers a lot more. So it's built on that basis, but it just gives you a lot of other applications, functionalities, still some transactions, additionally to be able to do your work and to go deeper and a bit more advanced in your scheduling and planning requirements. So production planning and detailed scheduling, why? What can it help with? First, of course, constraints. When you're talking about planning and when you're talking about scheduling, constraints are very important for you. And what do we mean with that? You want to plan constraint-based. That can be work center or resource constraints, or it can also be raw material constraints. You cannot plan production if your raw materials are not there. Then time continuous scheduling. I think most advanced scheduling apps will need that, but time continuous, you can really plan on the second, backlog-free production plans. So that means you can also take into account your breaks that you need. You will ensure that everything is realistic and maintainable and feasible. Of course, exception-based planning, I think it plays a big part in everything. You don't want to review everything when something changes. You just want to adjust, you want to insert maybe a very urgent new production order, and then you want to check if everything else is still okay. So by making use of an alert monitor that PPDS offers in a standard way, you can actually do that. So the alert monitor will tell you when there is a problem and when you need to act. You will not need to revise your full plan to see if everything is still okay. Linked to that, also you have optimization. Optimization, what does it mean? Basically, it's giving the system a bit the first initial control of what it needs to do. So it just calculates, and we have an optimizer both for planning and heuristics and for scheduling. So first, optimization, you let the system calculate what you need to produce, for example, in a specific day or maybe in some weeks. It can do that automatically for you. And of course, exception-based planning comes back into part. You will still need to review. It's not that you cannot do anything yet, but with a combination of optimization and exception-based planning, it's a very strong way of limiting the amount of manual work that you need to do. So I mentioned the planning optimizer, but you also have a scheduling optimizer in which the system will determine what is the optimal sequence, considering avoiding too many setups, avoiding too many cleanings, and of course, still making sure that you're delivering everything on time. Then root cause analysis. I will come back to this point in the form of a functionality, but basically, if there is an issue, what is creating the issue? If you have a sales order that is on delay, is it perhaps because a purchase order is not being delivered on time? Or what is the reason? And also here, PPDS can strongly help you with to really define multi-level where a problem lies. Apart from that, of course, you can also visualize your KPIs and keep an eye on them. And lastly, I want to emphasize that it's also possible to do simulations. You can do it within your scheduling board, which is a bit similar to CM25. You don't immediately post it, you can just change things and you can have a look. But what is strong here, immediately, real time, while you're doing your simulation, let's say, you will automatically get alerts if something is not okay. And on the other hand, you can even work in fully separate planning versions where you can just model and try out things, try out new things without actually changing it into your productive system. Now, let's dig a bit more deeper into functionalities. And of course, we are here checking what are the alternatives for a scheduling board. So a scheduling board here for PPDS is of course very important, although there are a lot of other functionalities. There are two scheduling boards actually. The first one that I just want to visualize is in the SAP GUI. So just to mention it from a historical point of view, embedded PPDS is a natural successor of APO PPDS. So everything that you can find in APO PPDS, basically you can still do in the SAP GUI. There is a Fiori component for sure, but you have this detailed scheduling board in the SAP GUI. Why am I mentioning it, although there is a Fiori board? If you're working on a version of S4HANA before 2022, then the PPDS scheduling board in Fiori is not that operational yet, and you will probably be more guided towards working in a SAP GUI. The advantage of this scheduling board, as it packs everything that APO PPDS can do, it has a full list of functionalities, it can do everything you need it to do. Disadvantage is it looks a bit outdated. And that's where our advanced scheduling board comes in, and if you have that version 2022 or newer, then of course we are more inclined to steer you towards the Fiori scheduling board. This looks more interesting visually, and it's also more adjustable by the user itself. You don't always need IT to come along and to help you with it. There is just a little bit the downside. There are here and there some functionalities that are not working yet. So if you need those specific functionalities, I'm talking here for example about block planning, then you will probably be directed towards the SAP GUI for now. That's an important remark to give. Then I just want to mention some other advanced functionalities. Again, it's not a limited list, it's just a couple of examples. And afterwards, I will also compare them with the other alternatives that we are presenting today. So first, we have our Gantt chart, which we mentioned, which we've shown, so I don't need to go into detail of that anymore. And of course, it offers drag and drop functionalities. Why am I mentioning it specifically? Because the drag and drop functionalities go a bit further than the ones in CM25. It's, for example, a lot more user-friendly to go to alternative lines. So you will immediately see what are the possible alternative lines. You can only reschedule to the ones that you can actually schedule it to. And also, but that's then linked to another functionality, even an optimizer or other heuristics are able to switch from one to the other if necessary. Skill integration, this is also something we actually did in a project. I mentioned it also for resource orchestration, but also here skill integration is feasible. You can manage that only, for a certain operation, that only the people can execute that operation that have the correct skill. So with link to the drag and drop functionalities, you will see who can execute it, you will see who has space, and you can start your scheduling of your possibly complex operations in a correct way, taking into account what everyone can do. Then the next one, multi-level pegging, is actually a planning functionality. And in essence, it's a very simple functionality because what does it do? It links your requirement element to a receipt element. So in this case, for example, a sales order with a stock transfer order and a stock transfer order with a production order. But as it can actually review this on a multi-level way, it becomes a quite strong functionality. That means that if you have, for example, a purchase order that is delayed, you can immediately see which are all the sales orders that are using this purchase order, so the raw material in its production process. So immediately you can see which are the sales orders that are at risk, and via alert monitoring, it will even tell you which ones might actually have a problem. The other way around, if you have a key sales order, you can visualize all the receipt elements linked to that, all your production orders, all your purchase orders. If you need to make sure that everything is still on time, you might have to expedite a little bit. So there also it can be very helpful. On top of that, all this multi-level pegging, these pegging relationships are being used in most of the apps and transactions and functionalities. For example, in your scheduling board, you can immediately visualize which operations and also which production orders are linked to each other, which ones need to be finished before you can start with the other one. You can also use it in a heuristic for some automated way. And then alert monitoring, I already mentioned that. It's strong. You need to make sure that it only shows what you need to or what you want to show, but it's a strong way of handling things. Optimization heuristics, finally, I already mentioned optimization, both possible in planning and in scheduling. If you don't want to go for optimization maybe initially, it's still possible to use a huge number of heuristics. And what is the difference? A heuristic helps with one step of your process, where the optimizer tends to take over most of what you need to do or assist with most of what you need to do. A heuristic does one thing for you. So it can help you avoiding tedious tasks, doing tedious tasks. It will automate some of your work, but you will still be in charge as a planner. I know that was a bit a lot. There's always a possibility to contact us later on for more information. How do these compare with the other solutions? Yeah, in the other solutions, basically we see, as I mentioned, PPDS is a bit the best-in-class solution from functionality point of view, so all the other ones lack. Of course, the Gantt chart planning boards, yeah, apart from the standard Fiori apps, all of them have that possibility. Drag and drop functionalities, again, the standard Fiori apps, maybe we should leave out of the comparison, but all of them have something like that, but none of them have something equally good. Resource orchestration comes closest to that. Skill integration, PPDS, yes. Resource orchestration as well, and the Flexo scheduling board, which will be presented by Nicola next, is actually also capable of doing that, but that will be explained later on. Multi-level pegging, simulations, alert monitoring, optimization, heuristics, all of that is actually only possible in ePPDS, with the exception that in resource orchestration, there are actually some ways of also automating certain steps of your scheduling, a bit similar as to the heuristics that are possible. Then, of course, if we compare it to CM25, PPDS can do everything and more. So again, functionality-wise, this will not be the problem. If you want the full range, if you really need an advanced tool, then yeah, this seems to be like the best solution. Yep. That brings us to our final one that we want to present.
So the final alternative is actually a custom development we built ourselves here for a particular customer a few years back, and we want to give the full context on why we built it. We built it for a specific company called Vigo, right? And what does Vigo do? They build or they produce orthesis, prosthetics, wheelchairs for people with disabilities. It's the kind of production that requires a lot of manual work and operators with specialized craftsmanship. You can imagine that these orthesis prosthetics are made individually and require a lot of craftsmanship. So the challenge that Vigo had was to bring some elements together on the shop floor, and that was on the one hand the tasks, the production order operations, the required skills and competencies that were required to execute those operations, and then lastly the people. Who are the people, the operators with the specialized craftsmanship to carry out those specific tasks. And these three elements were not located in SAP. It was in Excel files, people's heads, and an HR system. So the challenge was to bring it all together in one graphical planning board. And that's how we created our own Flexo scheduling board, which is a simple Gantt chart here, to solve that requirement. Capabilities, so basically it's a Gantt chart planning board, kind of mimicking the old CM25, with capacity visualization of your work centers, so non-working times are grayed out, etc., following the standard. You can reschedule and drag and drop any operation, so not just bottleneck operations, such as in the standard applications. You can filter on order parameters, there's deadline monitoring, some alert monitoring on when production needs to be finished. There's the system status follow-up with a color scheme, very similar to CM25. And last but not least, there's also competency and skill planning. So we set it up that way that work centers can have certain skills assigned to them and these tasks as well. And so when you're rescheduling and you drag and drop an operation from one work center to another, the app will check whether that work center can really carry out that work, yes or no. The takeaways for this particular app that we built is that we wanted to create an app with limited cost. We didn't want to rebuild PPDS or resource orchestration, and those are large products meant for a particular segment of customers. We wanted a very visual and simple AI, almost a less is more approach, and just a simple Gantt chart planning board with drag and drop, and very much focused on the customer, right? Where if a customer says we want some additional developments in a Gantt chart, we have some specific requirements for our shop floor or our planning supervisors, that we can easily develop that on top of this existing solution. And that's how we kind of position it as an accelerator, not just for S/4HANA Private Cloud, but especially also for the public cloud, where PPDS, for example, is not an option at this moment. So again, comparing it to the old CM25, our own solution does dispatching fine, and you can drag and drop any operation to any place, not just the bottleneck ones. Drag and drop order information is there. It's limited in the accelerator form, but if a customer says we want to add some parameters, then we can easily develop that on top. The user friendliness is quite high due to its less is more approach, to keeping it very simple as a base product. And its customizability, is of course with development. It's not as easy as in PPDS, where you do some checkboxes and some configuration. No, if you have additional requirements here, and we do have to develop it together. So that takes us to our final conclusions.
Yes, indeed. So if you were able to pay full attention to what we were saying, none of this should be new to you. This is a summary of all the separate screens, all the comparisons with CM25. So I think what should come out as clear, that the standard Fiori apps in the comparison, it doesn't come out as the best, and probably it's insufficient to fully replace what you are doing now within the graphical planning board and related transactions. All the other three we don't see as an immediate problem. We see it as viable solutions where with the Flexo scheduling board we have to mention that it's possible that here and there we might have to enhance the solution to make it fully exactly to your liking. But that's anyway the plan, to be a bit more customer specific there. Then if we go into the different solutions, what are the pros, what are the cons, and what is the advice that we give to you? In which case to see this as an actual viable alternative. So if we look into the standard Fiori apps, one of the obvious pros is there is no implementation cost, because they are just there. It's within the standard, the only thing you need to do is open the app and start working in it. What are the cons? Of course, it doesn't give you enough functionalities. You will see quickly, if you really want to do scheduling, it's not sufficient. So that's where our advice comes in. Only look at this as an option if your sequencing is not really required, or not at least within a Gantt chart, or maybe if you are handling it in a third-party tool. So not really an option, let's say. Then resource orchestration in digital manufacturing, actually it offers good functionalities. So it is definitely an option from a functionality point of view. And it also, if you have digital manufacturing, of course, a whole new world opens up of the possibilities, what you can do within digital manufacturing. That's a whole different discussion. We don't have the ambition to take you there today. But that also comes as a disadvantage is, of course, you need to have a DM license. And the digital manufacturing license is probably, if you only look at the scheduling component, it's probably not worth it. So there is that disadvantage. If you're really looking for a scheduling solution and not for an MES solution and only going for that for resource orchestration, we will probably say then there are better alternatives. Another con is that it's a bit more closer to execution and less planning, but that doesn't necessarily have to be a disadvantage if you already take care of your planning in alternative ways. So, in conclusion, as I mentioned, only really consider this as an option if digital manufacturing is already being used or planned to be used in your IT architecture. Then next, embedded PPDS. As I mentioned, there is a big list of functionalities possible. It is embedded in S4 and it's the most enhanced option. So obviously 3 big pros. So what are the reasons that you might decide no? Is of course there's an implementation effort. With complexity comes effort, which means that you need a project, you need analysis, you need implementation of those functionalities. So it does come at a cost of effort. And there's also a license cost, of course. Also another con, if you are using S4 public cloud, then this option falls away altogether. It's technically not feasible to use it in the public cloud. So our advice, this is actually the go-to solution within SAP, but you have to see for yourself whether your scheduling requirements are complex enough to go for ePPDS. Having said that, it is also possible to implement a light solution. You have a lot of these functionalities, but of course you don't need to use them. You can just say like, okay, I'll just maybe focus on that planning part to make sure that I visualize with pegging, for example, whether I have issues or not, and let's do the scheduling later. Or the other way around, if you just want to do some scheduling in a nice scheduling board, and maybe all the bells and whistles on top you will do later. So you have the advantage of doing a phased approach in your projects. But still, yeah, go for it if your environment is complex enough. Then that brings us to our last option, our Flexo scheduling board. And yeah, this is a Fiori app, so embedded in that sense as well. You also don't need an additional SAP license, so that's also definitely an advantage. And yeah, as it's our app, of course, we can extend it, we can enhance it via development. So if you have some very specific customer requirement that is not really delivered by anything else, maybe we can have a look at it if we can develop it for you. What is a disadvantage? Yeah, it doesn't cover all the functionalities, especially not comparing with the more advanced scheduling tools, because yeah, it's not without the development, but even with the development, I don't think it's our goal to rebuild PPDS in a Flexo scheduling board. That would be a bit too complex, that overshoots a bit the problem. Then probably we will just say, look into another advanced scheduling tool like PPDS. So our advice is, for your more basic scheduling requirements, or if you have a very customer specific enhancement, but apart from that not extremely complex requirements, we think Flexo scheduling board is definitely a good option to go for. And considering that public cloud PPDS is not possible, this is also something that we could deliver in public cloud as an alternative for your scheduling. This is a slide which basically groups all the information that we just mentioned. I will not go through it today, but we grouped it for you to have a one-page overview later on once we send you the slides. I hope it was interesting for you, so thank you for listening to us, and yeah, hopefully we hear from you soon.